took a second chance, trusted you again. I feel shattered. Broken strings cause you play me like a violin. Shame on me for all your 7 deadly sins. Had it all but you craved attention, drowning in your own reflection. Put me down just to see me get back up again. 6 feet under and you're ready to give all the pain. If I was your new addition, you make me part of your equation. Shattered from the past, wish you were my last. Shatter me to pieces like broken glass. To feel, but this isn't real. Now we're over. Take it all, there's nothing left here anyway. We used to talk, but now we don't know what to say. Now we're just two passing strangers. We tried, you lied, goodbye forever. Put me down just to see me get back up again. 6 feet under and you're ready to give all the pain. If I was your new addition, you make me part of your equation. Shattered from the past, wish you were my last. Shatter me to pieces like broken glass.
And hello there. We have another new scene because I'm really getting into this whole Twitch thing now. So welcome, everyone that is here. Edgar Perez, thank you for the follow and welcome. So for anyone who has not heard it, obviously aren't following me on Twitter, I lost my job and I could not be happier because I am finally free. Hello. I am free, but I also already got another possible job offer. So, we will see. I will have a new job or I will be a Twitch streamer. Or I'll be both. Who knows? Yeah, I just, I say things happen for a reason. I reached out to a former coworker yesterday because she had reached out to me through my work email previously. So I let her know, hey, I'm not there anymore, so I don't know who else is still there. And she said, hey, if I hear about anything, I'll let you know. And she said, I emailed her. And then this morning, someone else in the company wanted to know if she knew of anyone that could do that kind of work and that lived in California, because they specifically need someone that lives in California to support their offshore group. So I sent my resume and we will see. But at least I know there's work out there. And I know this company pays better. So, yep, I am a happy girl. And the bank finally released the rest of the deposit for my final paycheck. So, yeah, I think things are working out. You're currently reading The Hobbit? Hi, I like The Hobbit. I do enjoy The Hobbit. I like all of Tolkien's stuff. There was one that was really world building, the Silmarillion. I enjoyed it once. I would never read it again. But yeah, The Hobbit is a good book. I'm glad you're reading it. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, I'm not worried. Things will work out. So do you guys like this scene? I'm not too sure about it, but I kind of like it because it's a rainy window. And it's not too season specific. Also, if the rain is too loud or I am too loud, let me know. And I can adjust one or the other. The rain is super quiet. Okay, let me try to boost that up. Let's see. Interact. Is that better? And whoa, that was not what I would. God damn it. That wasn't what I wanted to happen. Yeah, I messed it up. No, you're not deaf. I clicked on the wrong thing, and instead of turning the sliders to animate, I reset them to something. So let's increase the volume. I don't think you're deaf. Can you hear it now? No? You know what? I know what it is. I bet it is set to monitor only, because it keeps doing that to me. Because I keep screwing up and saying yes to let it make changes. So let me check what my mixer settings are. Main on window. Okay, it's giving me a stream track number. Why can't I see? Okay, global settings. No, I don't understand. Oh my goodness. Why will my mixer settings not tell me if it is set to... Yeah, it's on monitor only. Okay, you should be able to hear it now. And it's probably going to be way too loud. Yeah, it's what I thought. Okay, let me reset it. Okay, what am I doing? Open up. Refresh. Okay, now we're back to what it was originally. You have to let me know if that is better, because I don't want it to sound like you're in the middle of the downpour. It's supposed to be just rain on the windows. Here, I'll turn it down. No. Alright, let me know how it is now. That's good? Okay. Alright. We'll lock that and hope for the best. Okay. And now we will begin with our reading. Ow. As I whack my phone on things. Okay. We are on chapter 5 of book 2. And this chapter is The White Rider. My very bones are chilled, said Gimli, flapping his arms and stamping his feet. Day had come at last. At dawn, the companions had made such breakfast as they could. Now, in the growing light, they were getting ready to search the ground again for sign of the hobbits. And do not forget that old man, said Gimli. I should be happier if I could see the print of a boot. Why would that make you happy? Said Legolas. Because an old man with feet that leave marks might be no more than he seemed, answered the dwarf. Maybe, said the elf, but a heavy boot might leave no print here. The grass is deep and springy. That would not baffle a ranger, said Gimli. A bent blade is enough for Aragorn to read, but I did not Uh-oh. My book just closed. Alright, now we'll take a brief break while I try to find the page I was on. Oh, look at you. Those cute little emotes. Okay. Back to the basics of reading without closing your book. Yes, we are such cozy. I love that one. I wish Twitch would hurry up and approve my animated one. I don't know what their problem is, but they will get to it sooner or later. That would not baffle a ranger, said Gimli. A bent blade is enough for Aragorn to read, but I do not expect him to find any traces. It was an evil phantom of Saruman that we saw last night. I am sure of it, even under the light of morning. His eyes are looking out on us from Fangorn, even now, maybe. It is likely enough, said Aragorn. Yet I am not sure. I am thinking of the horses. You said last night, Gimli, that they were scared away. But I did not think so. Did you hear them, Legolas? Did they sound to you like beasts in terror? No, said Legolas. I heard them clearly. But for the darkness and our own fear, I should have guessed that they were beasts wild with some sudden gladness. They spoke as horses will when they meet a friend that they have long missed. So I thought, said Aragorn, but I cannot read the riddle unless they return. Come, the light is growing fast. Let us look first and guess later. We should begin here, near to our own camping ground, searching carefully all about and working up the slope towards the forest. To find the hobbits is our errand, whatever we may think of our visitor in the night. If they escaped by some chance, then they must have hidden in the trees, or they would have been seen. If we find nothing between here and the eaves of the wood, then we will make a last search upon the battlefield and among the ashes. But there is little hope there. The horses of Rohan did their work too well. The tree stood mournfully above them, its dry leaves now hanging limp and rattling in the chill easterly wind. Aragorn moved slowly away. He came to the ashes of the watchfire near the river bank, and then began to retrace the ground back towards the knoll where the battle had been fought. Suddenly he stooped and bent low with his face almost in the grass. Then he called to the others. They came running up. Here at last we find news, said Aragorn. He lifted up a broken leaf for them to see, a large pale leaf of golden hue, now fading and turning brown. Here is the malorn leaf of Lorien, and there are small crumbs on it, and a few more crumbs in the grass. And see, there are some pieces of cut cord lying nearby. And here is the knife that cut them, said Gimli. He stooped and drew out of a tussock, into which some heavy foot had trampled it, a short, jagged blade. The haft from which it had been snapped was beside it. It was an orc weapon, he said, holding it gingerly and looking with disgust at the carved handle. It had been shaped like a hideous head with squinting eyes and leering mouth. Well, here's the strangest riddle that we have yet found, exclaimed Legolas. A bound prisoner escapes both from the orcs and from the surrounding horsemen. He then stops, while still in the open, and cuts his bonds with an orc knife. But how, and why? For if his legs were tied, how did he walk? And if his arms were tied, how did he use the knife? And if neither were tied, why did he cut the cords at all? Being pleased with his skill, he then sat down and quietly ate some whey bread. That at least is enough to show that he was a hobbit, without the malorn leaf. After that, I suppose, he turned his arms into wings and flew away singing into the trees. It should be easy to find him. We only need wings ourselves. There was sorcery here, right enough, said Gimli. What was that old man doing? What have you to say, Aragorn, to the reading of Legolas? Can you better it? Maybe I could, said Aragorn, smiling. There are some other signs near at hand that you must not have considered. I agree that the prisoner was a hobbit and must have had either legs or hands free before he came here. I guess it was his hands, because the riddle then becomes easier, and also because, as I read the marks, he was carried to this point by an orc. Blood was spilled there a few paces away, orc blood. There are deep prints of hoofs all around this spot, and signs that a heavy thing was dragged away. The orc was slain by horsemen, and later his body was hauled to the fire. But the hobbit was not seen. He was not in the open, for it was night and he still had his elven cloak. He was exhausted and hungry, and it is not to be wondered at that when he cut his bonds with the knife of the fallen enemy, he rested and ate a little before he crept away. But it is a comfort to know that he had some lembas in his pocket, even though he ran away without gear or pack. That, perhaps, is like a hobbit. I say he, though I hope and guess that both Merry and Pippin were here together. There is, however, nothing to show that for certain. And how do you suppose that either of our friends came to have a hand free? asked Gimli. I do not know how it happened, answered Aragorn. Nor do I know why an orc was carrying them away. Not to help them escape, we may be sure. Nay, rather I think that I now begin to understand a matter that has puzzled me from the beginning. Why, when Boromir had fallen, were the orcs content with the capture of Merry and Pippin? They did not seek out the rest of us, nor attack our camp, but instead they went with all speed toward Isengard. Did they suppose they had captured the ring-bearer and his faithful comrade? I think not. Their masters would not dare to give his faithful comrade, would not dare to give such plain orders to orcs, even if they knew so much themselves. They would not speak openly to them of the ring. They are not trusty servants. But I think the orcs had been commanded to capture hobbits alive at all costs. An attempt was made to slip out with the precious prisoners before the battle. Treachery, perhaps, likely enough with such folk. Some large and bold orc may have been trying to escape with the prize alone, for his own ends. There, that is my tale. Others might be devised, but on this we may count in any case. One at least of our friends escaped. It is our task to find him and help him before we return to Rohan. We must not be daunted by Fangorn, since need drove him into that dark place. I do not know which daunts me more, Fangorn or the thought of the long road through Rohan on foot, said Aragorn. Let us go to the forest. It was not long before Aragorn found fresh signs. At one point, near the bank of the Entwash, he came upon footprints. Hobbit prints, but too light for much to be made of them. Then again, beneath the bole of a great tree, on the very edge of the wood, more prints were discovered. The earth was bare and dry, and did not reveal much. One hobbit at least stood here for a while and looked back, and then he turned away into the forest, said Aragorn. Then we must go in too, said Gimli. But I do not like the look of this Fangorn, and we were warned against it. I wish the chase had led anywhere else. I do not think the wood feels evil, whatever tales may say, said Legolas. He stood under the eaves of the forest, stooping forward, as if he were listening, or peering with wide eyes into the shadows. No, it is not evil, or what evil is in it is far away. I catch only the faintest echoes of dark places where the hearts of the trees are black. There is no malice near us, but there is watchfulness and anger. Well, it has no cause to be angry with me, said Gimli. I have done it no harm. That is just as well, said Legolas, but nonetheless it has suffered harm. There is something happening inside, or going to happen. Do you not feel the tenseness? It takes my breath. I feel the air is stuffy, said the dwarf. This wood is lighter than Mirkwood, but it is musty and shabby. It is old, very old, said the elf. So old that almost I feel young again, as I have not felt since I journeyed with you children. It is old and full of memory. I could have been happy here if I had come in days of peace. I dare say you could, snorted Gimli. You're a wood elf anyway, though elves of any kind are strange folk. Yet you comfort me. Where you go, I will go. But keep your bow ready to hand, and I will keep my axe loose in my belt. Not for use on trees, he added hastily, looking up at the trees under which they stood. I do not wish to meet that old man at unawares without an argument ready to hand. That is all. Let us go. With that, the three hunters plunged into the forest of Fangorn. Legolas and Gimli left the tracking to Aragorn. There was little for him to see. The floor of the forest was dry and covered with a drift of leaves, but guessing that the fugitives would stay near the water, he returned often to the banks of the stream. So it was that he came upon the place where Merry and Pippin had drunk and bathed their feet. There, plain for all to see, were the footprints of two hobbits, one somewhat smaller than the other. "This is good tidings," said Aragorn. "Yet the marks are 2 days old, and it seems that at this point the hobbits left the waterside." "Then what shall we do now?" said Gimli. "We cannot pursue them through the whole fastness of Fangorn. We have come ill-supplied. If we do not find them soon, we shall be of no use to them, except to sit down beside them and show our friendship by starving together." "If that is indeed all we can do, then we must do that," said Aragorn. "Let us go on." They came at length to the steep, abrupt end of Treebeard's Hill, and looked up at the rock wall with its rough steps leading to the high shelf. Gleams of sun were striking through the hurrying clouds, and the forest now looked less gray and drear. "Let us go up and look about it," said Legolas. "I still feel my breath short. I should like to taste a freer air for a while." The companions climbed up. Aragorn came last, moving slowly. He was scanning the steps and ledges closely. "I am almost sure that the hobbits have been up here," he said. "But there are other marks, very strange marks, which I do not understand. I wonder if we can see anything from this ledge which will help us to guess which way they went next." He stood up and looked about, but he saw nothing that was of any use. The shelf faced southward and eastward, but only on the east was the view open. There he could see the heads of the trees descending in ranks towards the plain from which they had come. "We have journeyed a long way round," said Legolas. "We could have all come here safe together if we had left the great river on the second or third day and struck west. Few can foresee whether their road will lead them till they come to its end." "But we did not wish to come to Fangorn," said Gimli. "Yet here we are, and nicely caught in the net," said Legolas. "Look." "Look at what?" said Gimli. "There in the trees." "Where? I have not elf eyes." "Hush! Speak more softly. Look," said Legolas, pointing. "Down in the wood, back in the way that we have just come. It is he. Cannot you see him passing from tree to tree?" I see now," hissed Gimli. "Look, Aragorn, did I not warn you? There is the old man, all in dirty grey rags. That is why I could not see him at first." Aragorn looked and beheld a bent figure moving slowly. It was not far away. It looked like an old beggar man, walking wearily, leaning on a rough staff. His head was bowed, and he did not look towards them. In other lands they would have greeted him with kind words, but now they stood silent, each feeling a strange expectancy. Something was approaching that held a hidden power, or menace. Gimli gazed with wide eyes for a while, as step by step the figure drew nearer. Then suddenly, unable to contain himself longer, he burst out, "Your bow, Legolas! Bend it! Get ready! It is Saruman! Do not let him speak or put a spell upon us. Shoot first." Legolas took his bow and bent it, slowly, and as if some other will resisted him. He held an arrow loosely in his hand, but did not fit it to the string. Aragorn stood silent, his face watchful and intent. "Why are you waiting? What is the matter with you?" said Gimli in a hissing whisper. "Legolas is right," said Aragorn quietly. "We may not shoot an old man so, at unawares and unchallenged, whatever fear or doubt be on us. Watch and wait." At that moment the old man quickened his pace and came with surprising speed to the foot of the rock wall. Then suddenly he looked up, while they stood motionless looking down. There was no sound. They could not see his face. He was hooded, and above the hood he wore a wide-brimmed hat, so that all his features were overshadowed, except for the end of his nose and his grey beard. Yet it seemed to Aragorn that he caught the gleam of eyes keen and bright from within the shadow of the hooded brow. At last the old man broke the silence. Well met indeed, my friends, he said in a soft voice. I wish to speak to you. Will you come down, or shall I come up? Without waiting for an answer, he began to climb. Now, cried Gimli, stop him, Legolas. Did I not say that I wished to speak to you? Said the old man. Put away that bow, Master Elf. The bow and arrow fell from Legolas' hands, and his arms hung loose at his side. And you, Master Dwarf, pray take your hand from your axe haft till I am up. You will not need such arguments. Gimli started and then stood still as stone, staring, while the old man sprang up the rough steps as nimbly as a goat. All weariness seemed to have left him. As he stepped up onto the shelf, there was a gleam, too brief for certainty, a quick glint of white, as if some garment shrouded by the gray rags had been for an instant revealed. The intake of Gimli's breath could be heard as a loud hiss in the silence. Well met, I say again, said the old man, coming towards them. When he was a few feet away, he stood, stooping over his staff, with his head thrust forward, peering at them from under his hood. And what may you be doing in these parts? An elf, a man, and a dwarf, all clad in elvish fashion. No doubt there is a tale worth hearing behind it all. Such things are not often seen here. You speak of one that knows Fangorn well, said Aragorn. Is that so? Not well, said the old man. That would be the study of many lives. But I come here now and again. Might we know your name, and then hear what it is that you have to say to us, said Aragorn. The morning passes, and we have an errand that will not wait. As for what I wish to say, I have said it. What may you be doing, and what tale can you tell of yourselves? As for my name... He broke off, laughing long and softly. Aragorn felt a shudder run through him at the sound, a strange cold thrill, and yet it was not fear or terror that he felt. Rather, it was like the sudden bite of a keen air, or the slap of a cold rain that wakes an uneasy sleeper. My name, said the old man again. Have you not guessed it already? You've heard it before, I think. Yes, you have heard it before. But come now, what of your tale? The three companions stood silent and made no answer. There are some who would begin to doubt whether your errand is fit to tell, said the old man. Happily, I know something of it. We are tracking the footsteps of two young hobbits, I believe. Yes, hobbits. Don't stare as if you have never heard the strange name before. You have, and so have I. Well, they climbed up here the day before, and they met someone that they did not expect. Does that comfort you? And now you would like to know where they were taken. Well, maybe I can give you some news about that. But why are we standing? Your errand, you see, is no longer as urgent as you thought. Let us sit down and be more at ease. The old man turned away and went towards a heap of fallen stones and rock at the foot of the cliff behind. Immediately, as if a spell had been removed, the others relaxed and stirred. Gimli's hand went at once to his axe haft. Aragorn drew his sword. Legolas picked up his bow. The old man took no notice, but stooped and sat himself on a low flat stone. Then his grey cloak drew apart, and they saw beyond doubt that he was clothed beneath in all white. Saruman, cried Gimli, springing towards him with axe in hand. Speak! Tell us where you have hidden our friends. What have you done with them? Speak, or I will make a dint in your hat that even a wizard will find it hard to deal with. The old man was too quick for him. He sprang to his feet and leapt to the top of a large rock. There he stood, grown suddenly tall, towering above them. His hood and his grey rags were flung away. His white garments shone. He lifted up his staff, and Gimli's axe leapt from its grasp and fell ringing on the ground. The sword of Aragorn, stiff in his motionless hand, blazed with a sudden fire. Legolas gave a great shout and shot an arrow high into the air. It vanished in a flash of flame. Mithrandir, he cried. Mithrandir! Well met, I say to you again, Legolas. said the old man. They all gazed at him. His hair was white as snow in the sunshine, and gleaming white was his robe. His eyes under his deep brows were bright, piercing as the rays of sun. Power was in his hand. Between wonder, joy, and fear, they stood and found no words to say. At last, Aragorn stirred. "Gandalf," he said, "beyond all hope you returned to us in our need. What veil was over my sight?" "Gandalf," Gimli said nothing, but sank to his knees, shading his eyes. "Gandalf," the old man repeated, as if recalling from old memory a long disused word. "Yes, that was the name. I was Gandalf." He stepped down from the rock and picked up his gray cloak, wrapping it about him. It seemed as if the sun had been shining, but now was hid in cloud again. "Yes, you may still call me Gandalf," he said, and the voice was the voice of their old friend and guide. "Get up, my good Gimli. No blame to you, and no harm done to me. Indeed, my friends, none of you have any weapon that could hurt me. Be merry, we meet again. At the turn of the tide. The great storm is coming, but the tide has turned." He laid his hand on Gimli's head, and the dwarf looked up and laughed suddenly. "Gandalf," he said, "but you were all in white." "Yes, I am white now," said Gandalf. "Indeed, I am Saruman, one might say. Saruman as he should have been. But come now, tell me of yourselves. I have passed through fire and deep water since we parted. I have forgotten much that I thought I knew, and learned again much that I had forgotten. I can see many things far off, but many things that are close at hand I cannot see. Tell me of yourselves." "What do you wish to know?" said Aragorn. "All that has happened since we parted on the bridge would be a long tale. Will you not first give us news of the hobbits? Did you find them, and are they safe?" "No, I did not find them," said Gandalf. "There was a darkness over the valleys of the Emyn Muil, and I did not know of their capacity until the eagle told me." "The eagle," said Legolas. "I have seen an eagle high and far off. The last time was 3 days ago, above the Emyn Muil." "Yes," said Gandalf. "That was Gwahir the Windlord, who rescued me from Orthanc. I sent him before me to watch the river and gather tidings. His sight is keen, but he cannot see all that passes under hill and tree. Some things he has seen, and others I have seen myself. The ring now has passed beyond my help, or the help of any of the company that set out from Rivendell. Very nearly it was revealed to the enemy, but it escaped. I had some part in that, for I sat in a high place, and I strove with the dark tower, and the shadow passed. Then I was weary, very weary, and I walked long in dark thought." "Then you know about Frodo," said Gimli. "How do things go with him?" "I cannot say. He was saved from a great peril, but many lie before him still. He resolved to go alone to Mordor, and he set out. That is all that I can say." "Not alone," said Legolas. "We think that Sam went with him." "Did he?" said Gandalf, and there was a gleam in his eye and a smile on his face. "Did he indeed? It is news to me, yet it does not surprise me. Good, very good, you lighten my heart. You must tell me more. Now sit by me and tell me the tale of your journey." The companions sat on the ground at his feet, and Aragorn took up the tale. For a long while Gandalf said nothing, and he asked no questions. His hands were spread upon his knees, and his eyes were closed. At last, when Aragorn spoke of the death of Boromir, and of his last journey upon the great river, the old man sighed. "You have not said all that you know or guess, Aragorn, my friend," he said quietly. "Poor Boromir. I could not see what happened to him. It was a sore trial for such a man, a warrior and a lord of men. Galadriel told me that he was in peril, but he escaped in the end. I am glad. It was not in vain that the young hobbits came with us, if only for Boromir's sake. But that is not the only part they have to play. They were brought to Fangorn, and their coming was like the falling of small stones that start an avalanche in the mountains. Even as we talk here, I hear the first rumblings. Saruman had best not be caught away from home when the dam bursts. In one thing you have not changed, dear friend, said Aragorn. You still speak in riddles. What? In riddles? Said Gandalf. No, I was talking aloud to myself. A habit of the old. They chose the wisest person to present to speak to, though long explanations needed by the young are wearying. He laughed, but the sound now seemed warm and kindly as a gleam of sunshine. I am no longer young, even in the reckoning of men of the ancient houses, said Aragorn. Will you not open your mind more clearly to me? What then shall I say? Said Gandalf, and paused for a while in thought. This, in brief, is how I see things at the moment, if you wish to have a piece of my mind as plain as possible. The enemy, of course, has long known that the ring is abroad, and that it is borne by a hobbit. He knows now the number of our company that set out from Rivendell, and the kind of each of us, but he does not yet perceive our purpose clearly. He supposes that we are all going to Minas Tirith, for that is what he would himself have done in our place, and according to his wisdom it would have been a heavy stroke against his power. Indeed, he is in great fear, not knowing what mighty one may suddenly appear, wielding the ring and assailing him with war, seeking to cast him down and take his place. That we should wish to cast him down and have no one in his place is not a thought that occurs to him. That we should try to destroy the ring itself has not yet entered into his darkest dream, in which no doubt you will see our good fortune and our hope. For imagining war, he has let loose war, believing that he has no time to waste. For he that strikes the first blow, if he strikes it hard enough, may need to strike no more. So the forces that he has long been preparing, he is now setting in motion, sooner than he intended. Wise fool. For if he had used all his power to guard Mordor, so that none could enter, and bent all his guile to the hunting of the ring, then indeed hope would have faded. Neither ring nor bearer could long have eluded him. But now his eyes gaze abroad rather than near at home, and mostly he looks toward Minas Tirith. Very soon now his strength will fall upon it like a storm. For already he knows that the messengers he sent to waylay the company have failed again. They have not found the ring, neither have they brought away any hobbits as hostages. Had they done even so much as that, it would have been a heavy blow to us, and it might have been fatal. But let us not darken our hearts by imagining the trial of their gentle loyalty in the Dark Tower, for the enemy has failed so far, thanks to Saruman. Then is Saruman a traitor? Said Gimli. Indeed, yes, said Gandalf. Doubly. And is not that strange? Nothing that we have endured of late has seemed so grievous as the treason of Isengard. Even reckoned as a lord and captain, Saruman has grown very strong. He threatens the men of Rohan and draws off their help from Minas Tirith, even as the main blow is approaching from the east. Yet a treacherous weapon is ever a danger to the hand. Saruman also had a mind to capture the ring for himself, or at least to snare some hobbits for his evil purposes. So between them our enemies have contrived only to bring Merry and Pippin with marvelous speed, and in the nick of time, to Fangorn, where otherwise they would never have come at all. Also, they have filled themselves with new doubts that disturb their plans. No tidings of the battle will come to Mordor, thanks to the horsemen of Rohan, but the Dark Lord knows that 2 hobbits were taken in the Emyn Muil and borne away towards Isengard against the will of his own servants. He now has Isengard to fear, as well as Minas Tirith. If Minas Tirith falls, it will go ill with Saruman. It is a pity that our friends lie between, said Gimli. If no land divided Isengard and Mordor, then they could fight while we watched and waited. The victor would emerge stronger than either, and free from doubt, said Gandalf. But Isengard cannot fight Mordor unless Saruman first obtains the ring. That he will never do now. He does not yet know his peril. There is much that he does not know. He was so eager to lay his hands on his prey that he could not wait at home, and he came forth to meet and to spy on his messengers. But he came too late, for once, and the battle was over and beyond his help before he reached these parts. He did not remain here long. I look into his mind, and I see his doubt. He has no woodcraft. He believes that the horsemen slew and burned all upon prisoners or not. And he does not know of the quarrel between his servants and the orcs of Mordor, nor does he know of the winged messenger. The winged messenger? I shot at him with the bow of Galadriel above Sarn-Gabir, and I felled him from the sky. He filled us all with fear. What new terror is this? One that you cannot slay with arrows, said Gandalf. You only slew his steed. It was a good deed, but the rider was soon horsed again, for he was a Nazgul, one of the 9, who ride now upon winged steeds. Soon their terror will overshadow the last armies of our friends, cutting off the sun. But they have not yet been allowed to cross the river, and Saruman does not know of this new shape in which the ring wraiths have been clad. His thought is ever on the ring. Was it present in the battle? Was it found? What if Theoden, Lord of the Mark, should come by it and learn of its power? That is the danger that he sees. And he has fled back to Isengard to double and treble his assault on Rohan. And all the time there is another danger close at hand which he does not see, busy with his fiery thoughts. He has forgotten Treebeard. Now you speak to yourself again, said Aragorn with a smile. Treebeard is not known to me, and I have guessed part of Saruman's double treachery, yet I do not see in what way the coming of 2 hobbits to Fangorn has served, save to give us a long and fruitless chase. Wait a minute, cried Gimli. There is another thing that I should like to know first. Was it you, Gandalf, or Saruman, that we saw last night? You certainly did not see me, answered Gandalf. Therefore I must guess that you saw Saruman. Evidently we look so much alike that your desire to make an incurable dent in my hat must be excused. Good, good, said Gimli. I am glad that it was not you. Gandalf laughed again. Yes, my good dwarf, he said, it is a comfort not to be mistaken at all points. Do I not know it only too well? But of course I never blamed you for your welcome of me. How could I do so, who I have so often counseled my friends to suspect even their own hands when dealing with the enemy? Bless you, Gimli, son of Gloin. Maybe you will see us together one day and judge between us. But the hobbits, Legolas broke in. We have come far to seek them, and you seem to know where they are. Where are they now? With Treebeard and the Ents, said Gandalf. The Ents, exclaimed Aragorn. Then there is truth in the old legends about the dwellers in the deep forest and the giant shepherds of the trees. Are there still Ents in the world? I thought they were only a memory of ancient days, if indeed there were ever more than a legend of Rohan. A legend of Rohan? Cried Legolas. Nay, every elf in Wilderland has sung songs of the old Onodrim and their long sorrow. Yet even among us they are only a memory. If I were to meet one still walking in this world, then indeed I should feel young again. But Treebeard, that is only a rendering of Fangorn into the common speech. Yet you seem to speak of a person. Who is this Treebeard? Ah, now you are asking much, said Gandalf. The little that I know of his slow story would make a tale for which we have no time now. Treebeard is Fangorn, the guardian of the forest. He is the oldest of the Ents, the oldest living thing that still walks beneath the sun upon this Middle Earth. I hope indeed, Legolas, that you may yet meet him. Merry and Pippin have been fortunate. They met him here, even where we sit, for he came here 2 days ago and bore them away to his dwelling far off by the roots of the mountains. He often comes here, especially when his mind is uneasy and rumors of the world outside trouble him. I saw him 4 days ago striding among the trees, and I think he saw me, for he paused. But I did not speak, for I was heavy with thought, and weary after my struggle with the Eye of Mordor, and he did not speak either, nor call my name. Perhaps he also thought that you were Saruman, said Gimli. But you speak of him as if he was a friend. I thought Fangorn was dangerous. Dangerous, cried Gandalf. And so am I, very dangerous. More dangerous than anything you will ever meet, unless you are brought alive before the seat of the Dark Lord. And Aragorn is dangerous, and Legolas is dangerous. You are beset with dangers, Gimli, son of Gloin, for you are dangerous yourself in your own fashion. Certainly the forest of Fangorn is perilous, not least to those that are too ready with their axes, and Fangorn himself, he is perilous too, yet he is wise and kindly none the less. But now his long slow wrath is brimming over, and all the forest is filled with it. The coming of the hobbits, and the tidings that they brought have spilled it. It will soon be running like a flood, but its tide is turned against Saruman and the axes of Isengard. A thing is about to happen which has not happened since the elder days. The Ents are going to wake up and find that they are strong. What will they do? Asked Legolas in astonishment. I do not know, said Gandalf. I do not think they know themselves. I wonder. He fell silent, his head bowed in thought. The others looked at him. A gleam of sun through fleeting clouds fell on his hands, which lay now upturned on his lap. They seemed to be filled with light as a cup is with water. At last he looked up and gazed straight at the sun. The morning is wearing away, he said. Soon we must go. Do we go to find our friends and to see Treebeard? Asked Aragorn. No, said Gandalf. That is not the road that you must take. I have spoken words of hope, but only of hope. Hope is not victory. War is upon us and all our friends, a war in which only the use of the ring could give us surety of victory. It fills me with great sorrow and great fear, for much shall be destroyed, and all may be lost. I am Gandalf, Gandalf the White, but black is mightier still. He rose and gazed out eastward, shading his eyes as if he saw things far away that none of them could see. Then he shook his head. No, he said in a soft voice, it has gone beyond our reach. Of that at least let us be glad. We can no longer be tempted to use the ring. We must go down to face a peril near despair, yet that deadly peril is removed. He turned. Come, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, he said. Do not regret your choice in the valley of the Emyn nor call it a vain pursuit. You chose amid doubts the path that seemed right. The choice was just, and it has been rewarded. For so we have met in time, who otherwise might have met too late. But the quest of your companions is over. Your next journey is marked by your given word. You must go to Edoras and seek out Theoden in his hall, for you are needed. The light of Andúril must now be uncovered in the battle for which it has so long waited. There is war in Rohan, and worse evil. It goes ill with Theoden. Though we are not to see the merry young hobbits again, said Legolas. I did not say so, said Gandalf. Who knows? Have patience. Go where you must go, and hope. To Edoras. I go thither also. It is a long way for a man to walk, young or old, said Aragorn. I fear the battle will be over long ere I come there. We shall see, said Gandalf. Will you come now with me? Yes, we will set out together, said Aragorn. But I do not doubt that you will come there before me if you wish. He rose and looked long at Gandalf. The others gazed at them in silence as they stood there facing one another. The gray figure of the man, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, was tall and stern as stone, his hand upon the hilt of his sword. He looked as if some king out of the midst of the sea had stepped upon the shores of lesser men. Before him stooped the old figure, white, shining now as if with some light kindled within, bent, laden with years, but holding a power beyond the strength of kings. "Do I not say truly, Gandalf," said Aragorn at last, "that you could go whithersoever you wished quicker than I? And this I also say. You are our captain and our banner. The Dark Lord has 9, but we have one, mightier than they, the White Rider. He has passed through the fire and the abyss, and they shall fear him. We will go where he leads." "Yes, together we will follow you," said Legolas. "But first it would ease my heart, Gandalf, to hear what befell you in Moria. Will you not tell us? Can you not stay even to tell your friends how you were delivered?" "I have stayed already too long," answered Gandalf. "Time is short. But if there were a year to spend, I would not tell you all." "Then tell us what you will and time allows," said Gimli. "Come, Gandalf, tell us how you fared with the Balrog." "Name him not," said Gandalf, and for a moment it seemed that a cloud of pain passed over his face, and he sat silent, looking old as death. "Long time I fell," he said at last, slowly, as if thinking back with difficulty. "Long I fell, and he fell with me. His fire was about me. I was burned. Then we plunged into the deep water, and all was dark. Cold it was as the tide of death. Almost it froze my heart. Deep is the abyss that is spanned by Durin's bridge, and none has measured it," said Gimli. "Yet it has a bottom, beyond light and knowledge," said Gandalf. "Thither I came at last, to the utmost foundations of stone. He was with me still. His fire was quenched, but now he was a thing of slime, stronger than a strangling snake. We fought far under the living earth, where time is not counted. Ever he clutched me, and ever I hewed him, till at last he fled into dark tunnels. We were not made by Durin's folk, Gimli, son of Gloin. Far, far below the deepest delvings of the dwarfs, the world is gnawed by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he. Now I have walked there, but I will bring no report to darken the light of day. In that despair my enemy was my only hope, and I pursued him, clutching at his heel. Thus he brought me back at last to the secret ways of Khazad-dûm. Too well he knew them all. Ever up now we went, until we came to the endless stair." "Long has that been lost," said Gimli. "Many have said that it was never made, save in legend, but others say that it was destroyed." "It was made, and it had not been destroyed," said Gandalf. "From the lowest dungeon to the highest peak it climbed, ascending in unbroken spirals in many thousand steps, until it issued at last in Durin's tower, carved in the living rock of Zizakzigil, the pinnacle of the Silvertine. There upon Celebdil was a lonely window in the snow, and before it lay a narrow space, a dizzy eyrie above the mists of the world. The sun shone fiercely there, but all below was wrapped in cloud. Out he sprang, and even as I came behind, he burst into new flame. There was none to see, or perhaps in after ages songs would still be sung of the battle of the peak." Suddenly Gandalf laughed. "But what would they say in song? Those that looked up from afar thought that the mountain was crowned with storm. Thunder they heard, and lightning, they said, smote upon Celebdil, and leapt back broken into tongues of fire. Is not that enough? A great smoke rose about us, vapor and steam. Ice fell like rain. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place and broke the mountainside where he smote it in his ruin. Then darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time, and I wandered far on roads that I will not tell. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done, and naked I lay upon the mountain top. The tower behind was crumbled and to dust, the window gone, the ruined stair was choked with burned and broken stone. I was alone, forgotten, without escape upon the hard horn of the world. There I lay staring upward, while the stars wheeled over, and each day was as long as a life age of the earth. Faint to my ears came the gathered rumor of all lands, the springing and the dying, the stone and the weeping, and the slow everlasting groan of overburdened stone. And so at the last, way here the wind lord found me again, and he took me up and bore me away. Ever am I fated to be a burden, friend at need, I said. A burden you have been, he answered, but not so now. Light as a swan's feather in my claw you are. The sun shines through you. Indeed, I do not think you need me any more. Were I to let you fall, you would float upon the wind. Do not let me fall, I gasped, for I felt life in me again. Bear me to LOTR. That indeed is the command of the Lady Galadriel, who sent me to look for you, he answered. Thus it was that I came to Saris Galadhon and found you, but lately gone. I tarried there in the ageless time of that land where days bring healing, not decay. Healing I found, and I was clothed in white. Counsel I gave, and counsel took. Thence by strange roads I came, and messages I bring to some of you. To Aragorn I was bidden to say this. Where now are the Dunedain, Elisir, Elisir? Why do the kinsfolk wander afar? Near is the hour when the lost should come forth, and the grey company ride from the north. But dark is the path appointed for thee. The dead watch the road that leads to the sea. To Legolas she sent this word. Legolas Greenleaf, long under tree, in joy thou hast lived, beware of the sea. If thou hear'st the cry of the gull on the shore, thy heart shall then rest in the forest no more. Gandalf fell silent and shut his eyes. Then she sent me no message, said Gimli, and bent his head. Dark are her words, said Legolas, and little do they mean to those that receive them. That is no comfort, said Gimli. What then, said Legolas? Would you have her speak openly to you of your death? Yes, if she had naught else to say. What is that? Said Gandalf, opening his eyes. Yes, I think I can guess what her words may mean. Your pardon, Gimli. I was pondering the messages once again, but indeed she sent words to you, and neither dark nor sad. To Gimli, son of Gloin, she said, give his lady's greeting. Lock-bearer, wherever thou goest, my thought goes with thee, but have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree. In happy hour you have returned to us, Gandalf, cried the dwarf, capering as he sang loudly in the strange dwarf tongue. Come, come, he shouted, swinging his axe. Since Gandalf's head is now sacred, let us find one that is right to cleave. That will not be far to seek, said Gandalf, rising from his seat. Come, we've spent all the time that is allowed into a meeting of parted friends. Now there is need of haste. He wrapped himself again in his old tattered cloak, and led the way. Following him, they descended quickly from the high shelf, and made their way back through the forest, down the bank of the Entwash. They spoke no more words until they stood again upon the grass beyond the eaves of Fangorn. There was no sign of their horses to be seen. They have not returned, said Legolas. It will be a weary walk. I shall not walk, time presses, said Gandalf. Then lifting up his head, he gave a long whistle. So clear and piercing was the note that the others stood amazed to hear such a sound come from those old bearded lips. 3 times he whistled, and then faint and far off it seemed to them they heard the whinny of a horse borne up from the plains upon the eastern wind. They waited wondering. Before long there came the sound of hoofs. At first hardly more than a tremor of the ground, perceptible only to Aragorn as he lay upon the grass, then growing steadily louder and clearer to a quick beat. "There is more than one horse coming," said Aragorn. "Certainly," said Gandalf. "We are too great a burden for one." "There are three," said Legolas, gazing out over the plain. "See how they run? There is Hasufel, and there is my friend Alrod beside him. But there is another that strides ahead, a very great horse. I have not seen his like before." "Nor will you again," said Gandalf. "That is Shadowfax. He is the chief of the Muras, lord of horses, and not even Theoden, king of Rohan, has ever looked on a better. Does he not shine like silver and run as smoothly as a swift stream? He has come from me, the horse of the White Rider. We are going to battle together." Even as the old wizard spoke, the great horse came striding up the slope towards them. His coat was glistening and his mane flowing in the wind of his speed. The two others followed, now far behind. As soon as Shadowfax saw Gandalf, he checked his pace and whinnied loudly. Then, trotting gently forward, he stooped his proud head and nuzzled his great nostrils against the old man's neck. Gandalf caressed him. "It is a long way from Rivendell, my friend," he said, "but you are wise and swift and come at need. Far let us ride now together, and part not in this world again." Soon the other horses came up and stood quietly by, as if awaiting orders. "We go at once to Meduseld, the hall of your master, Theoden," said Gandalf, addressing them gravely. They bowed their heads. "Time presses, so with your leave, my friends, we will ride. We beg you to use all the speed that you can. Hasufel shall bear Aragorn, and Arad Legolas. I will set Gimli before me, and by his leave Shadowfax shall bear us both. We will wait now only to drink a little." "Now I understand a part of last night's riddle," said Legolas as he sprang lightly upon Arad's back. Whether they fled at first in fear or not, our horses met Shadowfax, their chieftain, and greeted him with joy. "Did you know that he was at hand, Gandalf?" "Yes, I knew," said the wizard. "I bent my thought upon him, bidding him to make haste, for yesterday he was far away in the south of this land. Swiftly may he bear me back again." Gandalf spoke now to Shadowfax, and the horse set off at a good pace, yet not beyond the measure of the others. After a while he turned suddenly, and choosing a place where the banks were lower, he waded the river, and then led them away due south into a flat land, treeless and wide. The wind went like gray waves through the endless miles of grass. There was no sign of a road or track, but Shadowfax did not stay or falter. "He is steering a straight course now for the halls of Theoden under the slopes of the White Mountains," said Gandalf. "It will be quicker so. The ground is firmer in the eastern net, where the chief northward track lies across the river, but Shadowfax knows the way through every fen and hollow." For many hours they rode on through the meads and riverlands. Often the grass was so high that it reached above the knees of the riders, and their steeds seemed to be swimming in a gray-green sea. They came upon many hidden pools and broad acres of sedge waving above wet and treacherous bogs, but Shadowfax found the way, and the other horses followed in his swath. Slowly the sun fell from the sky down into the west. Looking out over the great plain, far away the riders saw it for a moment like a red fire sinking into the grass. Low upon the edge of sight, shoulders of the mountains glinted red upon either side. A smoke seemed to rise up and darken the sun's disk to the hue of blood, as if it had kindled the grass as it passed down under the rim of earth. "There lies the gap of Rohan," said Gandalf. "It is now almost due west of us. That way lies Isengard." "I see a great smoke," said Legolas. "What may that be?" battle and war, said Gandalf. Ride on. Alright, that's the end of chapter 5, and before I go on to chapter 6, I'm gonna run and grab a glass of water. So, we'll be gone for like 5 minutes or so. So, if you need a drink, go get you a drink, and we will be right back. Alright, and we are back with more reading. Now we are on chapter 6, The King of the Golden Hall. They rode on through sunset and slow dusk and gathering night. When at last they halted and dismounted, even Aragorn was stiff and weary. Gandalf only allowed them a few hours' rest. Legolas and Gimli slept, and Aragorn lay flat, stretched upon his back, but Gandalf stood, leaning on his staff, gazing into the darkness. All was silent, and there was no sign or sound of living thing. The night was barred with long clouds, fleeting on a chill wind, when they rose again. Under the cold moon they went on once more, as swift as by the light of day. Hours passed, and still they rode on. Gimli nodded and would have fallen from his seat if Gandalf had not clutched and shaken him. Hasufel and Arod, weary but proud, followed their tireless leader, a gray shadow before them hardly to be seen. The miles went on. The waxing moon sank into the cloudy west. A bitter chill came into the air. Slowly in the east the dark faded to a cold gray. Red shafts of light leapt above the black walls of the Emyn Muil, far away upon their left. Dawn was clear and bright. A wind swept across their path, rushing through the bent grasses. Suddenly Shadowfax stood still and neighed. Gandalf pointed ahead. "Look," he cried, and they lifted their tired eyes. Before them stood the mountains of the south, white-tipped and streaked with black. The grasslands rolled against the hills that clustered at their feet, and flowed up into many valleys, still dim and dark, untouched by the light of dawn, winding their way into the heart of the great mountains. Immediately before the travelers, the widest of these lands opened like a long gulf among the hills. Far inward they glimpsed a tumbled mountain mass with one tall peak. At the mouth of the vale there stood like a sentinel a lonely height. About its feet there flowed, as a thread of silver, the stream that issued from the dale. Upon its brow they caught, still far away, a glint in the rising sun, a glimmer of gold. "Speak, Legolas," said Gandalf. "Tell us what you see there before us." Legolas gazed ahead, shading his eyes from the level shafts of the new-risen sun. "I see a white stream that comes from the snows," he said. "Where it issues from the shadow of the vale, a green hill rises upon the east. A dike and mighty wall and thorny fence encircle it. Within there rise the roofs of houses, and in the midst, set upon a green terrace, there stands aloft a great hall of men. And it seems to my eyes that it is thatched with gold. The light of it shines far over the land. Golden, too, are the posts of its doors. There men in bright mail stand, but all else within the courts are yet asleep." "Edoras, those courts are called," said Gandalf, "and Meduseld is that golden hall. There dwells Theoden, son of Thengel, king of the Mark of Rohan. We are come with the rising of the day. Now the road lies plain to see before us, but we must ride more warily, for war is abroad, and the Rohirrim, the horse lords, do not sleep, even if it seems so from afar. Draw no weapon, speak no haughty word, I counsel you all, until we come before Theoden's seat." The morning was bright and clear about them, and birds were singing when the travelers came to the stream. It ran down swiftly into the plain, and beyond the feet of the hills, turned across their path in a wide bend, flowing away east to feed the Entwash far off in its reed-choked beds. The land was green. In the wet meads and along the grassy borders of the stream grew many willow trees. Already in this southern land they were blushing red at their fingertips, feeling the approach of spring. Over the stream there was a ford between low banks, much trampled by the passage of horses. The travelers passed over and came upon a wide-rutted track leading towards the uplands. At the foot of the walled hill the way ran under the shadow of many mounds, high and green. Upon their western sides the grass was white as with a drifted snow. Small flowers sprang there like countless stars amid the turf. "Look," said Gandalf, "how fair are the bright eyes in the grass. Ever mind, they are called Cymbeline in this land of men, for they blossom in all the seasons of the year, and grow where dead men rest. Behold, we are come to the great barrows where the sires of Theoden sleep. 7 mounds upon the left and 9 upon the right," said Aragorn. "Many long lives of men it is since the golden hall was built. 500 times have the red leaves fallen in Mirkwood in my home since then," said Legolas. "And but a little while does that seem to us. But to the riders of the mark it seems so long ago," said Aragorn, "that the raising of this house is but a memory of song, and the years before are lost in the mist of time. Now they call this land their home, their own, and their speech is sundered from their northern kin." Then he began to chant softly in a slow tongue unknown to the elf and dwarf, yet they listened, for there was a strong music to it. "That, I guess, is the language of Rohirrim," said Legolas, "for it is like to this land itself, rich and rolling in part, and else hard and stern as mountains. But I cannot guess what it means, save that it is laden with the sadness of mortal men." "It runs thus in the common speech," said Aragorn, "as near as I can make it. Where now the horse and rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk, and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harp-string, and the red fire glowing? Where is the spring and the harvest, and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on the mountain, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west, behind hills into shadow. Who shall gather the smoke of the dead, wood burning, or behold the flowing years from the sea returning?" Thus spoke a forgotten poet long ago in Rowan, recalling how tall and fair was Yorl the young, who rode down out of the north, and their still wings upon the feet of his steed, Feller off, father of horses. So men still sing in the evening. With these words the travelers passed the silent mounds. Following the winding way up the green shoulders of the hills, they came at last to the wide wind-swept walls and the gates of Edoras. There sat many men in bright mail, who sprang at once to their feet and barred the way with spears. "Stay, strangers here unknown," they cried in the tongue of the Riddermark, demanding the names and errand of the strangers. Wonder was in their eyes, but little friendliness, and they looked darkly upon Gandalf. "Well do I understand your speech," he answered in the same language, "yet few strangers do so. Why then do you speak in the common tongue, as is the western in the west, if you wish to be answered?" "It is the will of Theoden King that none should enter his gates, save those who know our tongue and are our friends," replied the guards. "None are welcome here in days of war but our own folk, and those that come from Mundburg in the land of Gondor. Who are you that come heedless over the plain, thus strangely clad, riding horses like to our own horses? Long have we kept guard here, and we have watched you from afar. Neither have we seen other riders so strange, nor any horse more proud than is one of these that bear you. He is one of the Mirrors, unless our eyes are cheated by some spell. Say, are you not a wizard, some spy from Saruman, or phantoms of his craft? Speak now, and be swift." "We are no phantoms," said Aragorn, "nor do your eyes cheat you. For indeed, these are your own horses that we ride, as you knew well ere you asked, I guess. But seldom does thief ride home to the stable. Here are Hasufal and Erod, that Eomer, the third marshal of the Mark, lent to us only 2 days ago. We bring them back now, even as we promised him. Has not Eomer then returned and given warning of our coming?" A troubled look came into the guard's eyes. "Of Eomer I have naught to say," he answered. "If what you tell me is truth, then doubtless Theoden will have heard of it. Maybe your coming was not wholly unlooked for. It is but 2 nights ago that Wormtongue came to us and said that by the will of Theoden no stranger should pass these gates." "Wormtongue," said Gandalf, looking sharply at the guard. "Say no more. My errand is not to Wormtongue, but to the Lord of the Mark himself. I am in haste. Will you not go and send to say that we are come?" His eyes glinted under his deep brows as he bent his gaze upon the man. "Yes, I will go," he answered slowly. "But what names shall I report? And what shall I say of you? Old and weary you seem now, and yet you are fell and grim beneath, I deem." "Well do you see and speak," said the wizard, "for I am Gandalf. I have returned, and behold, I too bring back a horse. Here is Shadowfax the Great, whom no other hand can tame. And here beside me is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the heir of kings, and it is to Mundenberg that he goes. Here also are Legolas the elf and Gimli the dwarf, our comrades. Go now and say to your master that we are at his gates and would have speech with him if he will permit us to come into his hall." "Strange names you give indeed, but I will report them as you bid, and learn my master's will," said the guard. "Wait here a little while, I will bring you such answer as seems good to him. Do not hope too much. These are dark days." He went swiftly away, leaving the strangers in the watchful keeping of his comrades. After some time he returned. "Follow me," he said. "Theoden gives you leave to enter, but any weapon that you bear, be it only a staff, you must leave on the threshold. The door wardens will keep them." The dark gates were swung open. The travelers entered, walking in file behind their guide. They found a broad path, paved with hewn stones, now winding upward, now climbing in short flights of well-laid steps. Many houses built of wood and many dark doors they passed. Beside the way, in a stone channel, a stream of clear water flowed, sparkling and chattering. At length they came to the crown of a hill. There stood a high platform above a green terrace, at the foot of which a bright spring gushed forth from a stone carved in the likeness of a horse's head. Beneath was a wide basin from which the water spilled and fed the falling stream. Up the green terrace went a pair of stairs, high and broad, and on either side of the topmost step were stone-hewn seats. There sat other guards, with drawn swords laid upon their knees. Their golden hair was braided on their shoulders. The sun was blazoned upon their green shields. Their long corslets were burnished bright, and when they rose taller they seemed than mortal men. "There are the doors before you," said the guide. "I must return now to my duty at the gate. Farewell, and may the Lord of the Mark be gracious to you." He turned and went swiftly back down the road. The others climbed the long stair under the eyes of the tall watchman. Silent they stood now above and spoke no word, until Gandalf stepped out upon the paved terrace at the stair's head. Then suddenly, with clear voices, they spoke a courteous greeting in their own tongue. "Hail, comers from afar," they said, and they turned the hilts of their sword towards the travelers in token of peace. Green gems flashed in the sunlight. Then one of the guards stepped forward and spoke in the common speech. "I am the door ward of Theoden," he said. "Hama is my name. Here I must bid you lay aside your weapons before you enter." Then Legolas gave into his hand his silver-hafted knife, his quiver, and his bow. "Keep these well," he said, for they come from the golden wood, and the Lady of Lothlorien gave them to me." Wonder came into the man's eyes, and he laid the weapons hastily by the wall, as if he feared to handle them. "No man will touch them, I promise you," he said. Aragorn stood a while, hesitating. "It is not my will," he said, "to put aside my sword or to deliver Andúril to the hand of any other man." "It is the will of Theoden," said Hama. "It is not clear to me that the will of Theoden, son of Thengel, even though he be lord of the Mark, should prevail over the will of Aragorn, son of Arathorn, Elendil's heir of Gondor. This is the house of Theoden, not of Aragorn, even were he king of Gondor in the seat of Denethor," said Hama, stepping swiftly before the doors and barring the way. His sword was now in his hand, and the point towards the strangers. "This is idle talk," said Gandalf. "Needless is Theoden's demand, but it is useless to refuse. A king will have his way in his own hall, be it folly or wisdom." "Truly," said Aragorn, "and I would do as the master of the house bade me, were this only a woodsman caught, if I bore any sword but Andúril." "Whatever its name may be," said Hama, "here you shall lay it if you would not fight alone against all the men in Edoras." "Not alone," said Gimli, fingering the blade of his axe and looking darkly up at the guard, as if he were a young tree that Gimli had a mind to fell. "Not alone." "Come, come," said Gandalf. "We are all friends here, or should be, for the laughter of Mordor will be our only reward, if we quarrel. My errand is pressing. Here at least is my sword, Goodman Hama. Keep it well. Glamdring it is called, for the elves made it long ago. Now let me pass. Come, Aragorn." Slowly Aragorn unbuckled his belt, and himself set his sword upright against the wall. "Here I set it," he said, "but I command you not to touch it, nor to permit any other to lay hand on it. In this elvish sheath dwells the blade that was broken and has been made again. Telkar first wrought it in the deeps of time. Death shall come to any man that draws Elendil's sword, save Elendil's heir." The guard stepped back and looked with amazement on Aragorn. "It seems that you have come on the wings of song out of the forgotten days," he said. "It shall be, my lord, as you command." "Well," said Gimli, "if it has Andúril to keep it company, my axe may stay here too, without shame." And he laid it on the floor. "Now then, if all is as you wish, let us go and speak with your master." The guard still hesitated. "Your staff," he said to Gandalf. "Forgive me, but that, too, must be left at the door." "Foolishness," said Gandalf. "Prudence is one thing, but discourtesy is another. I am old. If I may not lean on my stick as I go, then I will sit out here until it pleases Theoden to hobble out himself to speak with me." Aragorn laughed. "Every man has something too dear to trust to another. But would you part an old man from his support? Come, will you not let us enter?" "The staff in the hand of a wizard may be more than a prop for age," said Hama. He looked hard at the ash staff on which Gandalf leaned. "Yet in doubt a man of worth will trust to his own wisdom. I believe you are friends, and folk worthy of honor, who have no evil purpose. You may go in." The guards now lifted the heavy bars of the door and swung them slowly inwards, grumbling on their great hinges. The travelers entered. Inside it seemed dark and warm upon the clear air upon the hill. The hall was long and wide and filled with shadows and half-lights. Mighty pillars upheld its lofty roof. But here and there bright sunbeams fell in glimmering shafts from the eastern windows, high under the deep eaves. Through the louver in the roof, upon the thin wisps of issuing smoke, the sky showed pale and blue. As their eyes changed, the travelers perceived that the floor was paved with stone of many hues. Branching runes and strange devices intertwined beneath their feet. They saw now that the pillars were richly carved, gleaming dully with gold and half-seen colors. Many woven cloths were hung upon the walls, and over their wide spaces marched figures of ancient legend, some dim with ears, some darkling in the shade. But upon one form the sunlight fell, a young man upon a white horse. He was blowing a great horn, and his yellow hair was flying in the wind. The horse's head was lifted, and its nostrils were wide and red as it neighed, smelling battle afar. Foaming water, green and white, rushed and curled about its knees. "Behold, Eeyore the Young," said Aragorn. Thus he rode out of the north to the battle of the field of Celebrant. Now the four companions went forward, past the clear wood fire burning upon the long hearth in the midst of the hall. Then they halted. At the far end of the house, beyond the hearth and facing north towards the doors, was a dais with 3 steps, and in the middle of the dais was a great gilded chair. Upon it sat a man so bent with age that he seemed almost a dwarf, but his white hair was long and thick and fell in great braids from beneath a thin golden circlet set upon his brow. In the center upon his forehead showed a single white diamond. His beard was laid like snow upon his knees, but his eyes still burned with a bright light, glinting as he gazed at the strangers. Behind his chair stood a woman clad in white. At his feet upon the steps sat a wizened figure of a man with a pale face and heavy-lidded eyes. There was silence. The old man did not move in his chair. At length Gandalf spoke. "Hail, Theoden, son of Thengel. I have returned, for behold, the storm comes, and now all friends should gather together, lest each singly be destroyed." Slowly the old man rose to his feet, leaning heavily upon a short black staff with a handle of white bone, and now the strangers saw that, bent though he was still tall, and must in youth have been high and proud indeed. "I greet you," he said, "and maybe you look for welcome. But truth to tell, your welcome is doubtful here, Master Gandalf. You have ever been a herald of woe. Troubles follow you like crows, and even the oftener the worse. I will not deceive you. When I heard that Shadowfax had come back riderless, I rejoiced at the return of the horse, but still more at the lack of the rider. And when Eomer brought the tidings that you had gone at last to your long home, I did not mourn. But news from afar is seldom sooth. Here you come again. And with you come evils worse than before, as might be expected. Why should I welcome you, Gandalf Stormcrew? Tell me that." Slowly he sat down again in his chair. "You speak justly, Lord," said the pale man, sitting upon the steps of the dais. "It is not yet 5 days since the bitter tidings came that Theored your son was slain upon the west marches, your right hand, second marshal of the Mark. In Eomer there is little trust. Few men will be left to guard your walls if he had been allowed to rule. And even now we learn from Gondor that the Dark Lord is stirring in the east. Such is the hour in which this wanderer chooses to return. Why indeed should we welcome you, Master Stormcrow? Lath spell, I name you, ill news, and ill lids for a moment. And ill news is an ill guest, they say." He laughed grimly as he lifted his heavy lids for a moment and gazed on the strangers with dark eyes. "You are held wise, my friend Wormtongue, and are doubtless a great support to your master," answered Gandalf in a soft voice. "Yet in 2 ways may a man come with evil tidings. He may be a worker of evil, or he may be such as leaves well alone and comes only to bring aid in time of need." "That is so," said Wormtongue, "but there is a third kind, pickers of bones, meddlers in other men's sorrows, carrion fowl that grow fat on war. What aid have you ever brought, Stormcrow? And what aid do you bring now?" It was aid from us that you sought last time that you were here. Then my lord bade you choose any horse that you would and be gone, and to the wonder of all you took Shadowfax in your insolence. My lord was sorely grieved, yet to some it seemed that to speed you from the land the price was not too great. I guess that it is likely to turn out the same once more. You will seek aid rather than render it. Do you bring men? Do you bring horses, swords, spears? That I would call aid. That is our present need. But who are these that follow at your tail? 3 ragged wanderers in grey, and you yourself the most beggar-like of the 4. The courtesy of your hall is somewhat lessened of late, Theoden, son of Thengel, said Gandalf. Has not the messenger from your gate reported the names of my companions? Seldom has any lord of Rohan received 3 such guests. Weapons might have laid at your doors that are worth many a mortal man, even the mightiest. Grey is their raiment, for the elves clad them, and thus they have passed through the shadow of great perils to your hall. Then it is true, as Ymer reported, that you are in league with the sorceress of the Golden Wood, said Wormtongue. It is not to be wondered at. Webs of deceit are ever woven in Dwymorden. Gimli strode a pace forward, but felt suddenly the hand of Gandalf clutch him by the shoulder, and he halted, standing stiff as stone. In Dwymorden and Lorien seldom have walked the feet of men. Few mortal eyes have seen the light that lies there ever, long and bright. Galadriel, Galadriel, clear as the water of your well, white is the star in your white hand, unmarred, unstained in leaf and land. In Dwymorden and Lorien, more fair than thoughts of mortal men. Thus Gandalf softly sang, and then suddenly he changed. Casting his tattered cloak aside, he stood up and leaned no longer on his staff, and he spoke in a clear, cold voice. The wise speak only of what they know, Grima, son of Galmad. A witless worm you have become. Therefore be silent and keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I have not passed through fire and death to bandy crooked words with a self-serving man till the lightning falls. He raised his sword. There was a roll of thunder. The sunlight was blotted out from the eastern windows. The whole hall became suddenly dark as night. The fire faded to sullen embers. Only Gandalf could be seen, standing white and tall before the blackened hearth. In the gloom they heard the hiss of Wormtongue's voice. Did I not counsel you, Lord, to forbid his staff? That fool Hama has betrayed us. There was a flash as if lightning had cloven the roof. Then all was silent. Wormtongue sprawled on his face. Now, Theoden, son of Thengel, will you hearken me? Said Gandalf. Did you ask for help? He lifted his staff and pointed to a high window. There the darkness seemed to clear, and through the opening could be seen high and far a patch of shining sky. Not all is dark. Take courage, Lord of the Mark, for better help you will not find. No counsel have I to give to those that despair, yet counsel I could give, and words I would speak to you. Will you hear them? They are not for all ears, but I bid you come out before your doors and look abroad. Too long have you sat in shadows and trusted to twisted tales and crooked promptings. Slowly Theoden left his chair. A faint light grew in the hall again. The woman hastened to the king's side, taking his arm, and with faltering steps the old man came down from the dais and paced softly through the hall. Wormtongue remained lying on the floor. They came to the doors, and Gandalf knocked. "Open!" he cried. "The Lord of the Mark comes forth." The doors rolled back, and a keen air came whistling in. A wind was blowing on the hill. "Send your guards down to the stairs' foot," said Gandalf. And you, lady, leave him a while with me. I will care for him. Go, Eowyn, sister-daughter, said the old king. The time for fear is past. The woman turned and went slowly into the house. As she passed the doors, she turned and looked back. Grave and thoughtful was her glance, as she looked on the king with cool pity in her eyes. Very fair was her face, and her long hair was like a river of gold. Slender and tall she was, in her white robe girt with silver. But strong she seemed, and stern as steel, a daughter of kings. Thus Aragorn for the first time in the full light of day beheld Eowyn, Lady of Rohan, and thought her fair, fair and cold, like a morning of pale spring that is not yet come to womanhood. And she now was suddenly aware of him, tall heir of kings, wise with many winters, grey-cloaked, hiding a power that yet she felt. For a moment still as stone she stood, then turning swiftly, she was gone. Now, Lord, said Gandalf, look out upon your land, breathe the free air again. From the porch upon the top of the high terrace they could see beyond the stream the green fields of Rohan fading into distant gray. Curtains of wind-blown rain were slanting down. The sky above and to the west was still dark with thunder, and lightning far away flickered among the tops of the trees. But the wind had shifted to the north, and already the storm that had come out of the east was receding, rolling away southward to the sea. Suddenly, through a rent in the clouds behind them, a shaft of sun stabbed down. The falling showers gleamed like silver, and far away the river glittered like a shimmering glass. "It is not so dark here," said Theoden. "No," said Gandalf. "Nor does age lie so heavily on your shoulders as some would have you think. Cast aside your prop." From the king's hand the black staff fell clattering on the stones. He drew himself up, slowly, as a man that is stiff from long bending over some dull toil. Now tall and straight he stood, and his eyes were blue as he looked into the opening sky. "Dark have been my dreams of late," he said, "but I feel as one new awakened. I would now that you had come before me, Gandalf, for I fear that already you have come too late, only to see the last days of my house. Not long now shall stand the high hall which Brego, son of Eorl, built. Fire shall devour the high seat. What is to be done?" "Much," said Gandalf, "but first send for Yomer. Do I not guess rightly that you hold him prisoner by the counsel of Grima, of him that all save you name the Worm-tongue?" "It is true," said Theoden. "He had rebelled against my commands and threatened death to Grima in my hall." "A man may love you, and yet not love Worm-tongue or his counsels," said Gandalf. "That may be. I will do as you ask. Call Hama to me. Since he proved untrusty as a door-ward, let him become an errand-runner. The guilty shall bring the guilty to judgment." When Hama had been summoned and had gone, Gandalf led Theoden to a stone seat, and then sat himself before the king upon the topmost stair. Aragorn and his companions stood nearby. "There is no time to tell all that you should hear," said Gandalf. "Yet if my hope is not cheated, a time will come ere long when I can speak more fully. Behold, you are come into a peril greater even than the wit of Worm-tongue could weave into your dreams. But see, you dream no longer. You live. Gondor and Rohan do not stand alone. The enemy is strong beyond our reckoning, yet we have a hope at which he has not guessed." Quickly now, Gandalf spoke. His voice was low and secret, and none save the king heard what he said. But ever as he spoke, the light shone brighter in Theoden's eyes. And I just lost my page again. Okay, you're back. Someday I will learn to not close the book while I'm reading it. Quickly now Gandalf spoke. His voice was low and secret, and none save the king heard what he said. But ever as he spoke, the light shone brighter in Theoden's eye, and at the last he rose from his seat to his full height, and Gandalf beside him, and together they looked out from the high place towards the east. Verily, said Gandalf, now in a loud voice, keen and clear, that way lives our hope, where sits our greatest fear. Doom hangs still on a thread, yet hope there is still, if we can but stand unconquered for a little while. The others too now turned their eyes eastward. Over the sundering league of lands, far away they gazed to the edge of sight, and hope and fear bore their thoughts still on, beyond dark mountains to the land of shadow. Where now was the ring-bearer? How thin indeed was the thread upon which doom still hung. It seemed to Legolas, as he strained his far-seeing eyes, that he caught a glint of white. Far away perchance the sun twinkled on the pinnacle of the tower of guard. And further still, endlessly remote and yet a present threat, there was a tiny tongue of flame. Slowly Theoden sat down again, as if weariness still struggled to master him against the will of Gandalf. He turned and looked at his great house. Alas, he said, that these evil days should be mine, and should come in my old age instead of that peace which I have earned. Alas for Boromir the brave. The young perish, and the old linger, withering. He clutched his knees with his wrinkled hands. Your fingers would remember their old strength better if they grasped a sword hilt, said Gandalf. Theoden rose and put his hand to his side, but no sword hung at his belt. Where has Grimace stowed it? He muttered under his breath. Take this, dear lord, said a clear voice. It was ever at your service. Two men had come softly up the stair and stood now a few steps behind the top. Yomer was there. No helm was on his head, no mail was on his breast, but in his hand he held a drawn sword, and as he knelt he offered the hilt to his master. How comes this? Said Theoden sternly. He turned toward Yomer, and the men looked in wonder at him, standing now proud and erect. Where was the old man whom they had left crouching in his chair or leaning on his stick? It is my doing, lord, said Hama, trembling. I understood that Yomer was to be set free. Such joy was in my heart that maybe I have erred. Since he was free again and a marshal of the mark, I brought him his sword as he bade me. To lay at your feet, my lord, said Yomer. For a moment of silence, Theoden stood looking down at Yomer as he knelt still before him. Neither moved. Will you not take the sword? Said Gandalf. Slowly Theoden stretched forth his hand. As his fingers took the hilt, it seemed to the watchers that firmness and strength returned to his thin arm. Suddenly he lifted the blade and swung it shimmering and whistling in the air. Then he gave a great cry. His voice rang clear as he chanted in the tongue of Rowan a call to arms. Arise now, riders of Theoden. Dire deeds awake, dark is it eastward. Let horses be bridled, horn be sounded. Forth, Eorlingus. The guards, thinking they were summoned, sprang up the stair. They looked at their lord in amazement, and then as one man they drew their swords and laid them at his feet. Command us, they said. West to Theoden Hall, cried Yomer. It is a joy to us to see you return into your own. Never again shall it be said, Gandalf, that you come only with grief. Take back your sword, Yomer, sister son, said the king. Go, Hama, and seek my own sword. Grima has it in his keeping. Bring him to me also. Now, Gandalf, you said that you had counsel to give, if I would hear it. What is your counsel? You have already taken it, answered Gandalf. To put your trust in Yomer, rather than in a man of crooked mind. To cast aside regret and fear. To do the deed at hand. Every man that can ride should be sent west at once, as Yomer counseled you. We must first destroy the threat of Saruman while we have time. If we fail, we fail. If we succeed, then we will face the next task. Meanwhile, your people that are left, the women and the children and the old, should fly to the refuges that you have in the mountains. Were they not prepared against just such an evil day as this? Let them take provision, but delay not, nor burden themselves with treasures, great or small. It is their lives that are at stake. The counsel seems good to me now, said Theoden. Let all my folk get ready. But you, my guests, truly you said, Gandalf, that the courtesy of my hall is lessened. You have ridden through the night, and the morning wears away. You have had neither sleep nor food. A guest house shall be made ready. There you shall sleep, and when you have eaten. Nay, lord, said Aragorn, there is no rest yet for the weary. The men of Rohan must ride forth today, and we will ride with them, axe, sword, and bow. We did not bring them to rest against your wall, Lord of the Mark, and I promised Yomer that my sword and his should be drawn together. Now indeed there is hope of victory, said Yomer. Hope, yes, said Gandalf, but Isengard is strong, and other perils draw ever nearer. Do not delay, Theoden, when we are gone. Lead your people swiftly to the hold of Dunharrow in the hills. Nay, Gandalf, said the king, you do not know your own skill in healing. It shall not be so. I myself will go to war, to fall in front of the battle, if it must be. Thus shall I sleep better. Then even the defeat of Rohan will be glorious in song, said Aragorn. The armed men that stood near clashed their weapons, crying, The Lord of the Mark will ride. Forth, Eorlingus. But your people must not be both unarmed and shepherdless, said Gandalf. Who shall guide them and govern them in your place? I will take thought for that ere I go, answered Theoden. Here comes my counselor. At that moment Hama came again from the hall. Behind him, cringing between two other men, came Grima, the worm-tongue. His face was very white. His eyes blinked in the sunlight. Hama knelt and presented to Theoden a long sword in a scabbard clasped with gold and set with green gems. Here, Lord, is Harrowgrim, your ancient blade, he said. It was found in his chest. Loth was he to render up the keys. Many other things are there which men have missed. You lie, said Wormtongue, and this sword your master himself gave into my keeping. And he now requires it of you again, said Theoden. Does that displease you? Assuredly not, lord, said Wormtongue. I care for you and yours as best I may. But do not weary yourself, or tax too heavily your strengths. Let others deal with these irksome guests. Your meat is about to be set on the board. Will you not go to it? I will, said Theoden, and let food for my guests be set on the board beside me. The host rides today. Send the heralds forth. Let them summon all who dwell nigh. Every man and strong lad able to bear arms, all who have horses, let them be ready in the saddle at the gate ere the 2nd hour from noon. Dear lord, cried Wormtongue, it is as I feared. This wizard has bewitched you, and none are left to defend the golden hall of your fathers and all your treasure, none to guard the Lord of the Mark. If this is bewitchment, said Theoden, it seems to me more wholesome than your whisperings. Your leechcraft ere long would have had me walking on all fours like a beast. No, not one shall be left, not even Grima. Grima shall ride too. Go, you have yet time to clean the rust from your sword. Mercy, lord, whined Wormtongue, groveling on the ground. Have pity on one worn out in your service. Send me not from your side. I at least will stand by you when all others have gone. Do not send your faithful Grima away. You have my pity, said Theoden, and I do not send you from my side. I go myself to war with my men. I bid you come with me and prove your faith. Wormtongue looked from face to face. In his eyes was the hunted look of a beast seeking some gap in the ring of his enemies. He licked his lips with a long pale tongue. Such a resolve might be expected from a lord of the house of Yorl, old though he be, he said. But those who truly love him would spare his failing years. Yet I see that I come too late. Others whom the death of my lord will perhaps grieve less have already persuaded him. If I cannot undo their work, hear me at least in this, Lord. One who knows your mind and honors your commands should be left in Yordis. Appoint a faithful steward. Let your counselor Grima keep all things till your return, and I pray that we may see it, though no wise man will deem it hopeful. Yomer laughed. And if that plea does not excuse you from more, most noble Worm-tongue, he said, what office of less honor would you accept? To carry a sack of meal up into the mountains, if any men would trust you with it. Nay, Yomer, you do not fully understand the mind of Master Worm-tongue, said Gandalf, turning his piercing glance upon him. He is bold and cunning. Even now he plays a game with peril and wins a throw. Hours of my precious time he has wasted already. Down, snake, he said suddenly in a terrible voice. Down on your belly. How long is it since Saruman brought you? What was the promised price? When all the men were dead, you were to pick your share of the treasure and take the woman you desire. Too long have you watched her under your eyelids and haunted her steps. Yomer grasped his sword. That I knew already, he muttered. For what reason I would have slain him before, forgetting the law of the hall. But there are other reasons. He stepped forward, but Gandalf stayed him with a hand. Yowen is safe now, he said. But you, Worm-tongue, you have done what you could for your true master. Some reward you have earned, at least. Yet Saruman is apt to overlook his bargains. I should advise you to go quickly and remind him, lest he forget your faithful service. You lie, said Worm-tongue. That word comes too often easy from your lips, said Gandalf. I do not lie. See, Theoden, here is a snake. With safety you cannot take it with you, nor can you leave it behind. To slay it would be just, but it was not always as it now is. Once it was a man, and did you service in its fashion. Give him a horse, and let him go at once, wherever he chooses. By his choice you shall judge him. Do you hear this, Worm-tongue, said Theoden? This is your choice. To ride with me to war, and let us see you in battle, whether you are true, or to go now, whither you will. But then, if ever we meet again, I shall not be merciful. Slowly, Worm-tongue rose. He looked at them with half-closed eyes. Last of all, he scanned Theoden's face and opened his mouth as if to speak. Then suddenly he drew himself up. His hands worked, his eyes glittered. Such malice was in them that men stepped back from him. He bared his teeth, and then with a hissing breath he sat before the king's feet, and darting to one side, he fled down the stair. After him, said Theoden. See that he does no harm to any, but do not hurt him or hinder him. Give him a horse if he wishes it. And if any will bear him, said Eomer. One of the guards ran down the stair. Another went to the well at the foot of the terrace, and in his helm drew water. With it he washed clean the stones that Worm-tongue had defiled. Now, my guests, come, said Theoden. Come and take such refreshment as haste allows. They passed back into the great house. Already they heard below them in the town the heralds crying and the war horns blowing. For the king was to ride forth as soon as the men of the town and those dwelling near could be armed and assembled. At the king's board sat Yomer and the 4 guests, and there also waiting upon the king was the Lady Eowyn. They ate and drank swiftly. The others were silent while Theoden questioned Gandalf concerning Saruman. How far back his treachery goes, no one can guess, said Sandalf. He was not always evil. Once I do not doubt that he was the friend of Rowan, and even when his heart grew colder, he found you useful still. But for long now, he has plotted your ruin, wearing the mask of friendship until he was ready. In those years, Wormtongue's task was easy, and all that you did was swiftly known in Isengard, for your land was open, and strangers came and went. And ever Wormtongue's whisperings was in your ear, poisoning your thought, chilling your heart, weakening your limbs, while others watched and could do nothing, for your will was in his keeping. But when I escaped and warned you, then the mask was torn, for those who would see. And after Wormtongue played dangerously, always seeking to delay you, to prevent your full strength being gathered. He was crafty, dulling men's wariness or working on their fears, as served the occasion. Do you not remember how eagerly he urged that no man should be spared on a wild goose chase northward, when the immediate peril was westward? He persuaded you to forbid Ymir to pursue the raiding orcs. If Ymir had not defied Wormtongue's voice speaking with your mouth, those orcs would have reached Isengard by now, bearing a great prize. Not indeed that prize which Saruman desires above all else, but at the least 2 members of my company, sharers of a secret hope, of which even to you, Lord, I cannot yet speak openly. Dare you think of what they might be suffering, or what Saruman might have learned to our destruction? I owe much to Ymir, said Theoden. Faithful heart may have forward tongue. Say also, said Gandalf, that to crooked eyes truth may wear a wry face. Indeed, my eyes were almost blind, said Theoden. Most of all I owe to you, my guest. Once again you have come in time. I would give you a gift ere we go, at your own choosing. You have only to name all that is mine. I reserve now only my sword. Whether I came in time or not is yet to be seen, said Gandalf. But as for your gift, Lord, I will choose one that will fit my need, swift and sure. Give me Shadowfax. He was only lent before, if loan we may call it. But now I shall ride him into great hazard, setting silver against black. I would not risk anything that is not my own, and already there is bond of love between us. You choose well, said Theoden, and I give him now gladly. Yet it is a great gift. There is none like Shadowfax. In him one of the mighty steeds of old has returned. None such shall return again. And to you, my other guests, I will offer such things as may be found in my armory. Swords you do not need, but there are helms and coats of mail of cunning work, gifts to my father out of Gondor. Choose from these ere we go, and may they serve you well. Now men came bearing raiment of war from the king's hoard, and they arrayed Aragorn and Legolas in shining mail. Helms too they chose, and round shields. Their bosses were overlaid with gold and set with gems, green and red and white. Gandalf took no armor, and Gimli needed no coat of rings, even if one had been found to match his stature, for there was no hauberk in the hordes of Edoras, of better make than his short corselet forged beneath the mountains in the north. But he chose a cap of iron and leather that fitted well upon his round head, and a small shield he also took. It bore the running horse, white upon green, that was the emblem of the house of Yorl. May it keep you well, said Theoden. It was made for me in Thengel's day, while still I was a boy. Gimli bowed. I am proud, Lord of the Mark, to bear your device, he said. Indeed, sooner would I bear a horse than be borne by one. I love my feet better, but maybe I shall come yet where I can stand and fight. It may well be so, said Theoden. The king now rose, and at once Eowyn came forward bearing wine. Fair through Theoden Hall, she said, receive now this cup and drink in a happy hour. Health be with thee at thy going and coming. Theoden drank from the cup, and she proffered it to the guests. As she stood before Aragorn, she paused suddenly and looked upon him, and her eyes were shining. And he looked down upon her fair face, and He looked down upon her fair face and smiled, but as he took the cup, his hand met hers, and he knew that she trembled at the touch. "Hail, Aragorn, son of Arathorn," she said. "Hail, Lady of Rohan," he answered, but his face now was troubled, and he did not smile. When they had all drunk, the king went down the hall to the doors. There the guards awaited him, and heralds stood, and all the lords and chiefs were gathered together that remained in Edoras or dwelt nearby. "Behold, I go forth, and it seems like to be my last riding," said Theoden. "I have no child. Theodred my son is slain. I name Yomer my sister's son to be my heir. If neither of us return, then choose a new lord as you will. But to someone I must now entrust my people that I leave behind to rule them in my place. Which of you will stay?" No man spoke. "Is there none whom you would name? In whom do my people trust?" "In the house of Orel," answered Hama. "But Yomer I cannot spare, nor would he stay," said the king, "and he is the last of that house." "I am not Yomer," answered Hama, "and he is not the last. There is Yowen, daughter of Eumund, his sister. She is fearless and high-hearted. All love her. Let her be as lord to the Jorlingus while we are gone." "It shall be so," said Theoden. "Let the heralds announce to the folk that the Lady Yowen will lead them." Then the king sat upon a seat before his doors, and Yowen knelt before him and received from him a sword and a fair corslet. "Farewell, sister-daughter," he said. "Dark is the hour, yet maybe we shall return to the Golden Hall. But in Dunharrow the people may long defend themselves, and if the battle go ill, thither will come all who escape." "Speak not so," she answered. "A year shall I endure for every day that passes until your return." But as she spoke, her eyes went to Aragorn, who stood nearby. "The king shall come again," he said. "Fear not. Not west but east does our doom await us." The king now went down the stair with Gandalf beside him. The others followed. Aragorn looked back as they passed towards the gate. Alone, Yowen stood before the doors of the house at the stair's head. The sword was set upright before her, and her hands were laid upon the hilt. She was clad now in mail, and shone like silver in the sun. Gimli walked with Legolas, his axe on his shoulder. "Well, at last we set off," he said. "Men need many words before deeds. My axe is restless in my hands, though I doubt not that these Rohirrans are fell-handed when they come to it. None the less, this is not the warfare that suits me. How shall I come to the battle? I wish I could walk and not bump like a sack at Gandalf's saddle-bow." "A safer seat than many, I guess," said Legolas. "Yet doubtless Gandalf will gladly put you down on your feet when blows begin, or Shadowfax himself. An axe is no weapon for a rider. And a dwarf is no horseman. It is orc-necks that I would hew, not shave the scalps of men," said Gimli, patting the haft of his axe. At the gate they found a great host of men, old and young, all ready in the saddle. More than 1,000 were there mustered. Their spears were like a springing wood. Loudly and joyously they shouted as Theoden came forth. Some held in readiness the king's horse, Snowmane, and others held the horses of Aragorn and Legolas. Gimli stood ill at ease, frowning, but Yomer came up to him, leading his horse. "Hail, Gimli, Gloin's son," he cried. "I have not had time to learn gentle speech under your rod, as you promised. But shall we not put aside our quarrel? At least I will speak no evil again of the Lady of the Wood." "I will forget my wrath for a while, Yomer, son of Eomund," said Gimli. "But if ever you chance to see the Lady Galadriel with your eyes, then you shall acknowledge her the fairest of ladies, or our friendship will end." "So be it," said Yomer. "But until that time pardon me, and in token of pardon ride with me, I beg. Gandalf will be at the head with the Lord of the Mark, but Firefoot my horse will bear us both, if you will." "I thank you indeed," said Gimli, greatly pleased. "I will gladly go with you if Legolas my comrade may ride beside us." "It shall be so," said Yomer. "Legolas upon my left and Aragorn upon my right, and none will dare to stand before us." "Where is Shadowfax?" said Gandalf. "Running wild over the grass," they answered. He will let no man handle him. There he goes, down by the ford, like a shadow among the willows." Gandalf whistled and called aloud the horse's name, and far away he bowed his head and neighed, and turning sped towards the host like an arrow. "Were the breath of the west wind to take a body visible, even so would appear," said Yomer, as the great horse ran up, until he stood before the wizard. "The gift seems already to be given," said Theoden, "but hearken all. Here now I name my guest, Gandalf Greyheim, wisest of counselors, most welcome of wanderers, a lord of the Mark, a chieftain of the Orlingas, while our kin shall last, and I give to him Shadowfax, prince of horses." "I thank you, Theoden King," said Gandalf. Then suddenly he threw back his grey cloak and cast aside his hat and leapt to horseback. He wore no helm or mail. His snowy hair flew free in the wind, his white robes shone dazzling in the sun. "Behold the White Rider," cried Aragorn, and all took up the words. "Our king and the White Rider," they shouted. "Forth, Yorlingus!" The trumpets sounded, the horses reared and neighed. Spear clashed in shield. Then the king raised his hand, and with a rush like the sudden onset of a great wind, the last host of Rohan rode thundering into the west. Far over the plain, Eowyn saw the glitter of their spears as she stood still, alone, before the doors of the silent house. And that is the end of that chapter. On to chapter 7, Helm's Deep. The sun was already westering as they rode from Edoras, and the light of it was in their eyes, turning all the rolling fields of Rohan to a golden haze. There was a beaten way northwestward along the foothills of the White Mountains, and this they followed, up and down in a green country, crossing small swift streams by many fords. Far ahead and to their right the misty mountains loomed. Ever darker and taller they grew as the miles went by. The sun went slowly down before them. Evening came behind. The host rode on. Need drove them. Fearing to come too late, they rode with all the speed they could, pausing seldom. Swift and enduring were the steeds of Rohan, but they were many leagues to go. 40 leagues and more it was as a bird flies from Edoras to the fords of the Isen, where they hoped to find the king's men that held back the hosts of Saruman. Night closed about them. At last they halted to make their camp. They had ridden for some 5 hours and were far out upon the western plain, yet more than half their journey still lay before them. In a great circle, under the starry sky and the waxing moon, they now made their bivouac. They lit no fires, for they were uncertain of events, but they set a ring of mounted guards about them, and scouts rode out far ahead, passing like shadows in the folds of the land. The slow night passed without tidings or alarm. At dawn the horns sounded, and within an hour they took the road again. There were no clouds overhead yet, but a heaviness was in the air. It was hot for the season of the year. The rising sun was hazy, and behind it, following it slowly up the sky, there was a growing darkness, as of a great storm moving out of the east. And away in the northwest there seemed to be another darkness brooding about the feet of the misty mountains, a shadow that crept down slowly from the wizard's veil. Gandalf dropped back to where Legolas rode beside Yomer. "You have the keen eyes of your fair kindred, Legolas," he said, "and they can tell a sparrow from a finch a league off. Tell me, can you see anything away yonder towards Isengard?" "Many miles lie between," said Legolas, gazing thither and shading his eyes with his long hand. "I can see a darkness. There are shapes moving in it, great shapes far away upon the bank of the river, but what they are I cannot tell. It is not mist or cloud that defeats my eyes. There is a veiling shadow that some power lays upon the land, and it marches slowly downstream. It is as if the twilight under endless trees were flowing downwards from the hills. And behind us comes a very storm of Mordor, said Gandalf. It will be a black night. As the second day of their riding drew in, the heaviness in the air increased. In the afternoon, the dark clouds began to overtake them, a somber canopy with great billowing edges flecked with dazzling light. The sun went down, blood red in a smoking haze. The spears of the riders were tipped with fire as the last shafts of light kindled the steep faces of the peaks of Thrihirn. Now very near they stood on the northernmost arm of the White Mountains, 3 jagged horns staring at the sunset. In the last red glow, men in the vanguard saw a black speck, a horseman riding back towards them. They halted, awaiting him. He came, a weary man with dinted helm and cloven shield. Slowly he climbed from his horse and stood there a while, gasping. At last he spoke. "Is Yomer here?" he asked. "You come at last, but too late and with too little strength. Things have gone evilly since Theodril fell. We were driven back yesterday over the Isen with great loss. Many perished at the crossing. Then at night fresh forces came over the river against our camp. All Isengard must be emptied, and Saruman has armed the wild hillmen and herd folk of Dunland beyond the rivers, and there also he loosed upon us. We were overmastered. The shield wall was broken. Erkenbrand of Westford has drawn off those men he could gather towards his fastness in Helm's Deep. The rest are scattered. Where is Yomer? Tell them there is no hope ahead. He should return to Edoras before the wolves of Isengard come there." Theoden had sat silent, hidden from the man's sight behind his guards. Now he urged his horse forward. "Come, stand before me, Ciorl," he said. "I am here. The last host of the Eorlingdis has ridden forth. It will not return without battle." The man's face lightened with joy and wonder. He drew himself up. Then he knelt, offering his notched sword to the king. "Command me, Lord," he cried, "and pardon me. You thought I remained in Bedusel bent like an old tree under winter snow. So it was when you rode to war. But a west wind has shaken the boughs," said Theoden. "Give this man a fresh horse. Let us ride to help of Ericbrand." While Theoden was speaking, Gandalf rode a short way ahead, and he sat there alone, gazing north to Isengard and west to the setting sun. Now he came back. "Ride, Theoden," he said. "Ride to Helm's Deep. Do not go to the fords of Isen, and do not tarry in the plain. I must leave you for a while. Shadowfax must bear me now on a swift errand." Turning to Aragorn and Yomer and the men of the king's household, he cried, "Keep well the Lord of the Mark till I return. Await me at Helm's Gate. Farewell." He spoke a word to Shadowfax, and like an arrow from the bow, the great horse sprang away. Even as they looked, he was gone. A flash of silver in the sunset, a wind over the grass, a shadow that fled and passed from sight. Snowmane snorted and reared, eager to follow, but only a swift bird on the wing could have overtaken him. "What does that mean?" said one of the guards to Hama. "That Gandalf Graham has need of haste," answered Hama. "Ever he goes and comes unlooked for." "Wormtongue, were he here, would not find it hard to explain," said the other. "True enough," said Hama, "but for myself I will wait until I see Gandalf again." "Maybe you will wait long," said the other. The host turned away now from the road to the fords of Isen and bent their course southward. Night fell, and still they rode on. The hills drew near, but the tall peaks of Thrihirn were already dim against the darkening sky. Still some miles away, on the far side of the Westfold Vale, lay a green combe, a great bay in the mountains, out of which a gorge opened in the hills. Men of that land called it Helm's Deep, after a hero of old wars who had made his refuge there. Ever steeper and narrower, it wound inward from the north under the shadow of the Thirn, till the crow-haunted cliffs rose like mighty towers on either side, shutting out the light. At Helm's Gate, before the mouth of the deep, there was a heel of rock thrust outward by the northern cliff. There upon its spur stood high walls of ancient stone, and within them was a lofty tower. Men said that in the far-off days of the glory of Gondor the Sea Kings had built here this fastness with the hands of giants. The Hornburg it was called, for a trumpet sounded upon the tower echoed in the deep behind, as if armies long forgotten were issuing to war from caves beneath the hills. A wall, too, the men of old had made it from the Hornburg to the southern cliff, barring the entrance to the gorge. Beneath it, by a wide culvert, the deepening stream passed out. About the foot of the Horn's Rock it wound, and flowed then in a gully through the midst of a wide green gore, sloping gently down the Helm's Gate to Helm's Dyke. Thence it fell into the deepening combe and out into the Westfold Vale. There in the Hornburg at Helm's Gate Ericbrand, master of Westfold, on the borders of the Mark, now dwelt. As the days darkened with threat of war, being wiser, he had repaired the wall and made the fortress strong. The riders were still in the low valley before the mouth of the combe, when cries and horn blasts were heard from their scouts that went in front. Out of the darkness arrows whistled. Swiftly a scout rode back and reported that wolf riders were abroad in the valley, and that a host of orcs and wild men were hurrying southward from the fords of Isen, and seemed to be making for Helm's Deep. "We have found many of our folk lying slain as they fled thither," said the scout, "and we have met scattered companies going this way and that, leaderless. What has become of Erkenbrand none seem to know. It is likely that he will be overtaken ere he can reach Helm's Gate, if he has not already perished." "Has aught been seen of Gandalf?" asked Theoden. "Yes, lord. Many have seen an old man in white upon a horse, passing hither and thither over the plains like wind in the grass. Some thought he was Saruman. It is said that he went away ere nightfall towards Isengard. Some say also that Wormtongue was seen earlier, going northward with a company of orcs." "It will go ill with Wormtongue if Gandalf comes upon him," said Theoden. "Nevertheless, I miss now both my counselors, the old and the new. But in this need we have no better choice than to go on, as Gandalf said, to Helm's Gate, whether Erkenbrand be there or no. It is known how great is the host that comes from the north." "It is very great," said the scout. "He that flies counts every foeman twice, yet I have spoken to stout-hearted men, and I do not doubt that the main strength of the enemy is many times as great as all that we have seen here." "Then let us be swift," said Yomer. "Let us drive through such foes as are already between us and the fastness. There are caves in Helm's Deep where hundreds may lie hid, and secret ways that lead up onto the hills." "Trust not to secret ways," said the king. "Saruman has long spied out this land. Still in that place our defenses may last long. Let us go." Aragorn and Legolas went now with Yomer in the van. On through the dark night they rode, ever slower as the darkness deepened, and their way climbed southward, higher and higher into the dim folds about the mountain's feet. They found few of the enemy before them. Here and there they came upon roving bands of orcs, but they fled ere the riders could take or slay them. "It will not be long, I fear," said Yomer, ere the coming of the king's host will be known to the leader of our enemies, Saruman or whatever captain he has sent forth." The rumor of war grew behind them. Now they could hear, borne over the dark, the sound of harsh singing. They had climbed far up into the deepening combe when they looked back. Then they saw torches, countless points of fiery light upon the black fields behind, scattered like red flowers, or winding up from the lowlands in long flickering lines. Here and there a larger blaze leapt up. "It is a great host that follows us hard," said Aragorn. "They bring fire," said Theoden. "They are burning as they come, rick, cot, and tree. This was a rich vale, and had many homesteads. Alas for my folk! Would that day was here, and we might ride down upon them like a storm out of the mountains," said Aragorn. "It grieves me to fly before them." "We need not fly much further," said Yomer. "Not far ahead now lies Helm's Dyke, an ancient trench and rampart scored across the Coombe, 2 furlongs below Helm's Gate. There we can turn around and give battle." "Nay, we are too few to defend the dikes," said Theoden. "It is a mile long or more, and the breach in it is wide. At the breach our rear guard must stand if we are pressed," said Yomer. There was neither star nor moon when the riders came back to the breach in the dike, where the stream from above passed out, and the road beside it ran down from the Hornburg. The rampart loomed suddenly before them, a high shadow beyond a dark pit. As they rode up, a sentinel challenged them. "The Lord of the Mark rides to Helm's Gate," Yomer answered. "I, Yomer, son of Yeoman, speak." "This is good tidings beyond hope," said the sentinel. "Hasten, the enemy is on your heels." The host passed through the breach and halted on the sloping sward above. They now learned to their joy that Eric Brand had left many men to hold Helm's Gate, and more had since escaped thither. "Maybe we have 1,000 fit to fight on foot," said Gambling, an old man, the leader of those who watched the dike. "But most of them have seen too many winters, as I have, or too few, as my son's son here. What news of Erkenbrand? Word came yesterday that he was retreating hither with all that is left of the best riders of Westfold, but he has not come." "I fear that he will not come now," said Yomer. "Our scouts have gained no news of him, and the enemy fills the valley behind us." "I would that he had escaped," said Theoden. "He was a mighty man. In him lived again the valor of Helm the Hammerhand. But we cannot wait long here. We must draw all our forces now behind the walls. Are you well armored? We bring little provision, for we rode forth to open battle, not to besiege." "Behind us in the caves of the deep are 3 parts of the folk of Westfold, old and young, children and women," said Gambling. "But great store of food, and many beasts and their fodder, have also been gathered there." "That is well," said Yomer. "They are burning or despoiling all that is left in the vale. If they come to bargain for our goods at Helm's Gate, they will pay a high price," said Gambling. The king and his riders passed on. Before the causeway that crossed the stream they dismounted. In a long file they led their horses up the camp and passed within the gates of Hornburg. There they were welcomed again with joy and renewed hope, for now there were men enough to man both the burg and the barrier wall. Quickly Yomer set his men in readiness. The king and the men of his household were in the Hornburg, and there were also many of the Westfold men. But on the deeping wall and its tower and behind it, Yomer arrayed most of the strength that he had, for here the defense seemed more doubtful, if the assaults were determined and in great force. The horses were led far up the deep under such guard as could be spared. The deeping wall was 20 feet high, and so thick that 4 men could walk abreast along the top, sheltered by a parapet over which only a tall man could look. Here and there were clefts in the stone, through which men could shoot. This battlement could be reached by a stair running down from a door in the outer court of the Hornburg. 3 flights of steps led also up onto the wall from the deep behind, but in front it was smooth, and the great stones of it were set with such skill that no foothold could be found at the joints, and at the top they hung over like a sea-shelved cliff. Gimli stood leaning against the breastwork upon the wall. Legolas sat above on the parapet, fingering his bow and peering out into the gloom. "This is more to my liking," said the dwarf, stamping on the stones. "Ever my heart rises as we draw near the mountains. There is good rock here. This country has tough bones. I felt them in my feet as we came up through the dike. Give me a year and 100 of my kin, and I would make that a place that armies would break upon like water." "I do not doubt it," said Legolas, "but you are a dwarf, and dwarves are strange folk. I do not like this place, and I shall like it no more by the light of day. But you comfort me, Gimli, and I am glad to have you standing nigh with your stout legs and your hard axe. I wish there were more of your kin among us, but even more would I give for 100 good archers of Mirkwood. We shall need them. The Rohirrim have good bowmen after their fashion, but they are too few here, too few." "It is dark for archery," said Gimli. "Indeed, it is time for sleep. Sleep, I feel the need of it, as never I thought any dwarf could. Riding is tiring work. Yet my axe is restless in my hand. Give me a row of orchnecks and room to swing, and all weariness will fall from me." A slow time passed. Far down in the valley, scattered fires still burned. The hosts of Isengard were advancing in silence now. Their torches could be seen winding up the coombes in many lines. Suddenly, from the dike, yells and screams, and the fierce battle cries of men broke out. Flaming brands appeared over the brink and clustered thickly at the breach. Then they scattered and vanished. Men came galloping back over the field and up the ramp to the gates of Hornburg. The rear guard of the Westfolders had been driven in. "The enemy is at hand," they said. "We loosed every arrow that we had and filled the dike with orcs, but it will not halt them long. Already they are scaling the banks at many points, thick as marching ants, but we have taught them not to carry torches." It was now past midnight. The sky was utterly dark, and the stillness of the heavy air foreboded storm. Suddenly the clouds were seared by a blinding flash. Branched lightning smote down upon the eastward hills. For a staring moment the watchers on the wall saw all the space between them and the dike lit with white light. It was boiling and crawling with black shapes, some squat and broad, some tall and grim, with high helms and sable shields. Hundreds and hundreds more were pouring over the dike and through the breach. A dark tide rolled up to the walls from cliff to cliff. Thunder rolled in the valley. Rain came lashing down. Arrows thick as the rain came whistling over the battlements, and fell clinking and glancing on the stones. Some found a mark. The assault on Helm's Deep had begun, but no sound or challenge was heard within. No answering arrows came. The assailing host halted, foiled by the silent menace of rock and wall. Ever and ever the lightning tore aside the darkness. Then the orc screamed, waving spear and sword, and shooting a cloud of arrows at any that stood revealed upon the battlements. And the men of the mark, amazed, looked out, as it seemed to them, upon a great field of dark corn, tossed by a tempest of war, and every ear glinted with barbed light. Brazen trumpeters sounded. The enemy surged forward, some against the deeping wall, others towards the causeway and the ramp that led up to the Hornburg gates. There the hugest orcs were mustered, and the wild men of the Dunland fells. A moment they hesitated, and then on they came. The lightning flashed and blazoned upon every helm and shield. The ghastly hand of Isengard was seen. They reached the summit of the rock. They drove towards the green. Then at last an answer came. A storm of arrows met them, and a hail of stones. They wavered, broke, and fled back, and then charged again, broke and charged again, and each time, like the incoming sea, they halted at a higher point. Again trumpets rang, and oppressive roaring men leapt forth. They held their great shields above them like a roof, while in their midst they bore two trunks of mighty trees. Behind them, orc archers crowded, sending a hail of darts against the bowmen on the walls. They gained the gates. The trees, swung by strong arms, smote the timbers with a rating boom. If any man fell, crushed by a stone hurtled from above, 2 others sprang to take his place. Again and again the great ram swung and crashed. And I think this is where I'm going to end it because the words are starting to blur on the page for me. So, I will mark where I am leaving off and we will continue on tomorrow. And thank you all for coming out and joining us for this little reading time. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hopefully I put you to sleep the way I put myself to sleep reading this. So I will hopefully see you the next time. I'm going to try to stream again tomorrow. And for now, I say take care of yourselves and have a good night or morning or whatever time of day or night it is for you. We're glad you were here. Take care.
Initiating goodnight sequence. Dispersing appropriate dosage of compound 347. Initiating phase 1 of memory calibration. This won't hurt a bit. Just close your eyes.